Gimel Amud Beis, Eiruvin Gimel Amud Beis. We are 4 lines up from the wide lines. We're learning a statement of Rabbi Nachman as explained by Abaya, as told over by Abaya. And the rest of then we're going to discuss as it's told over by Rava. Abaya and Rava are students of Rabbi Nachman. Students of Rabbi, also Rabbi Nachman. So Abaya says in the name of Rabbi Nachman that there's 2 types of amas. There's an amma that's 5 tvachim, and there's an amma that's 6 tvachim. So we're talking about that an amma is a measurement from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So how big is that? So they actually made 2 measurements. One is 5 tvachim and one is 6 tvachim. And when it comes to the mavai, he says we're going to use the amma 5 tvachim, because we have limitations on how high it could be. So if you have a smaller measurement, then you're being stricter. And when it comes to kalayim, we're going to use an amma of 6 tvachim, because over there you need to distance grain from the vineyard. So if you use a larger measurement, you're being stricter. So either way, you're being stricter. So today we're going to start with the 6 tefach amma by kalayim. So it starts with Amas kalayim ba'ama bas shisha l'may hilchasa. When it says that the amma of kalayim was an amma of 6 tvachim, regarding which halacha was this relevant to? So we give 2 halachas here: the karachas hakerem or the machal hakerem. There's 2 types of patches, empty patches in a vineyard. Karachas, which means bald, is a patch in the center of the vineyard. And machal, which means a circle or a dance, is a patch that's on the perimeter of the vineyard. So the Tanan, before it even tells us what it is, the Mishnah says karachas hakerem is this clearing, this empty area in the vineyard. B'shama yomrim 24 amas. That in order to be able to plant in there, that clearing needs to be 24 amas. Bisulem sheshasri amas. Bisul says it's 16 amas. It didn't tell us exactly what's going on there. It just tells us that there's a machlekes. First thing is there's a machlekes. Then we'll tell you about what. Okay, but we know that there's a machlekes in the size. It's 24 or 16. Machal hakerem, the patch that's around the vineyard. That's Beshamim Sheshas Reyames, Bisulem Shtemes Reyames. Bishamim says it's 16, Bisul says it's 12. Okay, so Bisul is always giving us a smaller measurement. And Bishamim, naturally, as expected, is giving us the larger measurement. If you're going to want to plant other plants, other vegetables, grain, in a vineyard, it has to be that the patch is a certain size, so it's distanced from the grapes, from the vines. Now the Mishnah goes on, what is this patch that's in the center of the vineyard? So it explains, kerem shecharav b'emtzeisei. Okay, the vines in the center of the vineyard got destroyed. So ein sham sheshas reyamas. If you don't have 16 amas there, lo yavi zer l'shem, you can't sow grain in there. Based on his opinion. Hayusham Sheshas Riyama. Let's say you do have 16 amas there. So nice and like the Abidase. So what you do is 4 amas for each side. You see, what would happen by the vineyards is they needed to dig up the soil around the roots. I think that was for watering or for nutrients. And they would dig that up. So they would use a plow to go around the sides of the vines. Now that took 4 amas. It took 4 amas to go around. Maybe for harvesting the grapes, they would use an animal to come around. They could put it in the wagon behind it. They needed 4 amas along the grapes, along the vines. So if you have 4 amas on each side, because you have 2 rows of grapes. 2 rows of grapes. Then each one needs 4 amas next to it. Each one will have 4 amas next to it. That's 8 amas. And then you'll have 8 amas in the center. Now, really, a makam chashuv is 4 amas. But we're thinking that there's a makam chashuv that's attached to this one and a makam chashuv that's attached to that one. So it needs to be, if you would divide it in half, you would need to have a full area of 4 amas per side of this vineyard. That would be considered a separate area that's not part of the vineyard. It would be a sada. If it's not the size of a sada, then we would say that it's bottled to the vineyard, and then it would be aser. So it needs to have its own chashivas. That's where they get the 16 from. Vezu machal hakerem. What is the circle around the vineyard? Machal actually means a dance, which may mean that when the grapes were ready, they would dance around the vineyard. You can see that happening. But it just means a circle, because they would dance in a circle. Bein kerem legeder. This is between the vineyard and the fence. Ein sham shtei mesrei. If you don't have 12 amas, what are the 12 amas? Well, you don't want to plant right next to the wall anything. That's going to ruin the wall. You don't want to plant right next to the vineyard because you need 4 amas to do the work of the vineyard. So you lose 8 amas there. And then you need an area of 4 amas to be considered makam chashuv. So there you go, 12. If it's less than 12, then you can't plant it. You can plant in the rest. It's leaving out against the wall that you're not going to plant. Okay, so we have a amma of 6 tvachim that's being used to show you, that's being used to keep you distance from the vineyard. The Gemara says, 1 second. You're telling me that when it comes to kalayim, you're always going to use a measurement of an amma of 6 tvachim. There's a little bit of a problem, because we're going to show you that if you use a measurement of 6 tvachim, you're actually being lenient. Because it says that if you plant the vines too close together, the rows too close together, then it becomes not a vineyard. It just becomes like a mess. It's not a vineyard, and the halachas of the vineyard won't apply. Now, if you extend that area by saying that every amma is 6 tvachim, then you're making it not a vineyard in a lenient way. You're adding more area there. The tzufim means that it's one after another. If you plant them too close together, the Tanan, we start in the Mishnah. Kerem hanatua al paches me'arba amas. If a vineyard is planted and it's less than 4 amas apart from each row of vines, Reb Shimon Amein Kerem, Reb Shimon says it's not a vineyard. You planted it too close. So if I use a measurement of an amma of 5 tvachim, then if it's a little bit more away, then it's already a vineyard. It has all the halachas of kalayim. But if I use a measurement of 6 tvachim, then they've just enlarged that measurement to make it not a vineyard. You're being lenient. And our whole point here was to be strict, that Reb Nachman was being strict either way. The Chacham say that it is a kerem. Our emphasis right now is on the opinion of Reb Shimon. That's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. He holds that it's not a vineyard. And if we're going to translate every amma as an amma of 6 tvachim, we're being lenient. Chacham say is a kerem. How do the Chacham say it's a kerem if it's planted too close? It's easy. What you do is you only look at the ones that are furthest apart, and then you ignore everything in the middle, and then it's 4 tvachim away. See, what we do is you say the middle ones don't count. That's how the Chacham do. And Reb Shimon says, no, the middle ones do count, and it's a mess. It's not a vineyard. So the Gemara answers, it's not a problem. Reb Nachman is not following the opinion of Reb Shimon, he's following the opinion of the Rabbanan. K'Rabbanan damri havi kerem. So that halacha is not relevant. So therefore, all the halachas of a vineyard, all the halachas of kalayim are an amma of 6 tvachim. Are you going to tell me it comes out of leniency according to Reb Shimon? He says, yeah, we don't hold like Reb Shimon. Be by Yisema and other teretz. Li'olam Reb Shimon. We are following the opinion of Reb Shimon. I say, how could it be that Kalayim is an Amma 6 Tvachim is going to be a leniency? V'roiv Hamas Kamar. We didn't mean every halacha of Kalayim we have to use an Amma of 6 Tvachim. We meant usually in Kalayim we use an Amma of 6 Tvachim because we're trying to get things further apart. You're right, there's one halacha that's going to come out in a leniency, and we're not referring to that point. Because usually you want to have things further apart. So if you use larger amas, they become further apart. There is one where if you make it further apart, if you enlarge that span, it's going to be a leniency. So that's, we're not referring to that. All of this was the opinion of Abaya explaining Rav Nachman, quoting Rav Nachman. Now we have Rava Mishmeder Rav Nachman, a new Gemara. Rava in the name of Rav Nachman says like this: Kol amis ba'ama bas shisha. All the amas are 6 tvachim. Ela halalu sheichakes v'halalu atzavis. But these amas are sad and these amas are happy. These amas are happy, these amas are depressed. Seichik is to laugh. And atzev means to be sad. And what it means is that when someone laughs, so his mouth opens. So when we talk about a tefach laughing, we mean that the fingers open. So how do you measure the tefach? Tefach is the fist. So if you open the fingers, it gets a little larger. If you squeeze the fingers, when someone's sad, so then it gets tighter.
Smith.
Yeah.
We don't measure it like that. We measure it like that. So you can make it as long as you want, but we're measuring it this way, up, not that way.
But 1 second. Show me that again. I wasn't seeing it properly.
You showed that if it was loose, then it would be like that.
Right.
But it would make a difference to the tefach because the tefach is going that way.
Yeah. So, but the fingers spread out. You spread the fingers out, then it gets wider.
Yeah, but you don't measure by the fingers. You measure right by the palm. You can't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you don't. So you don't get it higher. And your
Uh-huh.
tongue doesn't
Let me look at the sources to see if that's accurate. 1 second.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Uh-huh.
The thumb is not a finger.
Yeah, the thumb wouldn't be included in this.
There's no way to make your hand more loose.
Yeah. No, the sources say that you're measuring the fingers.
It doesn't make a difference because you would measure a tefach as for its boys. You don't measure either one. You have the
You don't
size
measure
of
it attached.
You measure each etzba separately, and the question is, you measure etzba, which is how big is an etzba, how many sarim, and then the question is, when you go times 4, do you put a tiny space between each one, or you just times the value by 4? In other words, let's say etzba is 1 centimeter, which I believe it is. So then is it 1 centimeter times 4, which is exactly 4 centimeters, or do you take 4 objects, which are a centimeter, and put them near each other, which would be slightly larger?
Very good. So it's not even attached to the hand. Yes, you follow? It's not even attached to the hand. It's just individual fingers. When you say individual fingers, Rabbi Lipsker, which finger would be that individual finger that you're...
That's a very good question. That's a machlekes for itself. That's part of where machlekes the size of the amma came from. But let's assume that a finger is about 1 centimeter.
Well, the etzba, if it's etzba, the etzba is the first finger, right?
Etzba usually means the first finger, index finger.
So 4 index fingers spread out. Okay, very good.
Yes, that makes sense.
So now the Gemara has. So that's going to be a distinction between mavoi and kalayim. By the mavi, we're going to use 6 tefach, amas of 6 tefachim, but each tefach is going to be a little bit spread out. That's going to give us, it's going to be an amma of 6 tefachim, but each tefach is going to be squeezed. That's going to make our share smaller. And by kalayim, we're going to do amos of 6 tvachim. It's going to be spread out. It's going to make our shear bigger. That we're going to mean we need to spread things out. Meisvei, where's the question? Kol amos shamachamim bam bashisha, ubad shlayim mechuvanis. All amos have 6 tvachim, but they can't be precise. It means they can't be the minimal amount. Bishlam the Rava. We understand this according to Rava. Rava says exactly that the amos are 6 tvachim, which is exactly what we saw in this brisa, and they can't be mechuvanis. It can't be exact. You have to spread them out by kalayim, let's say. So you would have to spread it out, and that's exactly what the brisa would be referring to. So that these are laughing and these are sad, which means that we have them, some are spread out and some are tight. But what does it mean according to Abai? It's a big problem over here. Abai is telling me in the name of Reb Nachman that some amos are 5 tvachim. Some amos are 5 tvachim. It's not so. The brisa says all amos are 6 tvachim. The question is how spread out each tefach is. Amalach Abaya would respond to you in explanation of this brisa. Ema amas kalayim ba'ama bas shisha. What it means is, by kalayim, you need to, all amas of kalayim are 6 tvachim. It's not referring to all amas, because according to Abaya, amas of mavoi, in the laws of Eiruvin, are 5 tvachim. But all amas of kalayim are 6 tvachim. And what's the brisa saying? Besides that it's 6 tvachim, that it's large, you also have to spread it out. It's double increase. The Gemara says 1 second. If you look at that brisa, Midik Tani Sefer, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Eimer, Shimon ben Gamliel, we didn't have him before. Before we had a Reb Shimon. This is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. This is usually the father of Rabbi Nasi. He says, Kol Am Shamer Chachamim Bekalayim Ba'ama Bashisha Bavad Shleim Tzimtzamis. He says, he continues off the statement of the Tanakama that says all amas are 6 tvachim, as long as they're not precise. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says all amas by kalayim are 6 tvachim. What does that tell me? That the Tanakama was referring to not kalayim, it's referring to everything. So how could Abaye answer and say that it's referring to kalayim? From Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, we can infer that the first Tana was not referring to kalayim. Mechlal the Tanakama kol amas kamer. It's referring to all amas. Amalach Abaya. Abaya would be able to respond to you. Amalach means that he's not actually here, but he would answer. I don't get the question. He quoted to me half a brisa, and he asked the question based on that half. If you quote the second half, you see that opinion is exactly my opinion. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that it's only by kalayim. He asked me a question from the Tanakama. I have an easy answer. I follow Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Another army, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. I go like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The whole reason why that was a question was because you didn't quote that second part. Now that you've quoted, now you see Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is exactly the way I say it. That by kalayim it's 6 tvachim. The Gemara says La Abaya v'adei Tanayi. According to Abaya, there's no way of saying that the Tanakama holds like him. There's definitely a machlekes in Abaya's. Abaya cannot say that I go like the Tanakama. Somehow the Tanakama is going to fit with me. The Rava milei matanayi, but what about according to Rava? Question is, can Rava fit with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Because according to the Tanakama, Rava said Rava can fit with the Tanakama for sure, because the Tanakama holds that all amas are 6 tvachim. Excellent. What about according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel that says kalayim is 6 tvachim? The question is, what is the emphasis of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Is his emphasis the 6 tvachim that's by kalayim, or is the emphasis shlayim tzimtzamis that they shouldn't be squeezed? We have 2 ways of reading Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Amalach Rava will say to you, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel ha'asal hashmin and amas kalayim leyitzamtzim. his emphasis was not that the Kalayim Amma is 6 Tvachim. His emphasis was that by the Kalayim Amma of 6 Tvachim, which all Ammas are 6 Tvachim, you shouldn't squeeze it. What's the difference between Tzamim and Mechuvanis? Mechuvanis must mean not that it's tight. It means that they shouldn't be exactly, all Ammas shouldn't be exactly the same. So in the Tanna Kamma, we said all Ammas are 6 Tvachim, but they shouldn't be precise, means each one similar to the next, even though they're all 6 Tvachim, but some of them will be squeezed and some of them will be spread out. They shouldn't be exactly the same. And mitzimtzemes means it shouldn't be tight. So by kalayim, it shouldn't be tight. That's what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying. So therefore, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is only explaining the Tanna Kamma. The Tanna Kamma says that all Ammas are 6 Tvachim, but they shouldn't all be exactly the same. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, yeah, let me explain that. By kalayim, it shouldn't be tight. It should be spread out. So why doesn't he just say that? By kalayim, it shouldn't be tight. What's he referring to? When he says that he adds in that it's an amma of 6 tvachim, why does he have to say? What does he have to say that all ammas are 6 tvachim? When it says lav lamute amma sukav ammas mavui, is it not exactly what we don't want to hear? Which means the opinion of Abaya is not what this price is saying, that an amma of a sukkah, an amma of a mavui, or an amma of 5 tvachim. This is law, you don't have to say that. We have something else that we can perfectly fit with, agree with. Lamuti amas yisayv amas sefer. The amma that was used to measure the mizbeach, some of it was 5 tvachim, some were 6 tvachim. You see, by the mizbeach together with the corners on the top, which are just 4 corners on the side, but if you measure from the corner to the floor, it's 10 ammas. Now, that should tell you that that's 60 tvachim. An amma 6 tvachim. Turns out it's only 58 tvachim. So, the explanation for that is that, we're not going to be able to ignore this entirely, but the 58 is easy because the foundation of the mizbech is called the yesod. That's the base. Now, the base was an amma tall and an amma in, and you could actually walk on that base, or it was like a step, an amma up and an amma in. The amma up was only 5 tvachim. The amma in, Rashi tells us, was 6 tvachim. When you go to the corners on the top, they were also an amma of 5 tvachim. And an amma in was also an amma of 5 tvachim. Now, there was one more amma that needs to be measured. The amma in of the Seivid. It's sort of like a little walkway around an indent of an amma that went in, and that was an amma of 5 tvachim. So I have one going up 5 tvachim, one going in a 5 tvachim, and then kranes is another 2. So it sounds like there's 4 ammas of 5 tvachim, but only 2 of them are going vertical. Tiksiv, it says in the pasuk, Ve'ela midas ha-mizbeach. These are the measurements of the mizbeach ba'amas, using ammas. There's an amma v'tefach. There's 2 ways of reading this pasuk in Rashi based on the way Rashi translates it in Yecheskel and the way he translates it here. In Yecheskel, he's relying on the Targum Yonasan. And then there's an interpretation of this pasuk based on the Gra. The Gra reads it like this. He says there's 2 ammas. There's the amma, and then there's an amma b'tefach. That's why he starts off by ammais, 2 ammas. There's an amma, that means an amma of 5 tvachim, and then there's an amma b'tefach, which is an amma of 6 tvachim. The cheka amma, going back to the first amma, which is just 5 tvachim, that's the chek. That is what's carved out on the bottom. That's referring to the yesod. That base was only the first amma. The amma rachav, The Gemara is going to explain what this is in a moment. The Gemara is going to translate what this is. What was that referring to? Zayisai, that's the base. So the base has an amma going up of only 5 tvachim. The amma, the width, that's referring to the seifev, which we said that was an amma going in. You can see Dr. Stein's picture. So the very bottom has an amma that goes up. The vertical amma there is 5 tvachim. Okay. Then you go up, I believe, you go in 1 amma of 6 tvachim, then you go up, I believe, 6 ammas. You go up 5 ammas, which is a total of 6 ammas. I can't see in that picture. Let's see what it says. One, two, it's 5. You go up 5 ammas. Then you have it's a little above the center. You look, there's a horizontal amma, which is only 5 tvachim. Gvul al svasa saviv, elu akranis. And the border that's around, that's referring to those top corners you see that's in black over there. That are the corners. Now, we call that a zeres. Gvul al svasa saviv, we said zeres. Zeres, I think, is the span. Rabbi Lipsker, is it the span between the thumb and the index finger as far as you could spread it out? Is that a zeres? I think that's considered half an amma. So what you would do is...
Well, there's 2 ways to measure a zeres. One is from the top of your pinky to the back. You'd spread it out that way, not like that. And it's usually considered a half amma. Sometimes you measure directly half amma. It would be from the bottom of the thumb to the top of the pinky if you spread it that way. It's usually considered a half amma, but sometimes you have to adjust. In other words, if it says zeres ha'ama, it usually means 3 tvachim.
Oh. Here, what it's referring to by the corner is that you measure from the center of the corner on the top, and then you have half amma this way, half amma that way, which means that it's an amma. It's another way of saying an amma. 2 half ammas. So you measure from the center. Okay. Then it says, this is the top of the mizbeach. This is referring to not the top of our mizbeach, the outside mizbeach, but the golden mizbeach, the golden altar, which I think it said was an amma by 2 ammas. That amma on the top was an amma of the mizbeach hazav, was an amma of 5 tvachim. Okay. What did we do over here? We said, we explained the brisa according to Rabbi's opinion that all ammas are really 6 tvachim when it comes to our discussion of mavoi and sukkah and kilayim. It's all 6 tvachim. We had to fit in a brisa that says an amma of 6 tvachim, and we said, what was that referring to? What is it excluding? So we said, well, by the mizbeach you have other ammas over there, but that's not what's normally discussed. I'm Rav Chia Barashi and Rav. Rav Chia Barashi, a student of Rav, he says in the name of Rav, Shiurin, Chatzitzin, and Machitzin. 3 laws. Shiurin means measurements. Huge discussion, all the measurements of the Torah. Chatzitzin is something that interrupts when you go to the mikveh. It's called the chatzitza. So if someone isn't perfectly clean, so he has a chatzitza on him, then the mikveh doesn't work. And mechitzin, which means walls or partitions, all of those things are halach l'Moshe Misinai. Those are tradition from Moshe. When it says halach l'Moshe Misinai, it means that it's not written in the Torah anywhere. We just have all of these laws, all measurements, all the laws of chatzitza, and all of the mechitzas, the laws of what's considered a partition. That is halach l'Moshe Misinai. That's just a tradition with no source in the Torah. Gemara asks right away, Shirin deraisahu, measurements it says in the Torah. What are you telling me? It's halach l'Moshe Misinai. It's a tradition. It's written in the verse. What is the verse? The ksiv, Eretz Chita Saira, B'Geimer. Doesn't finish the pasuk, but it lists the 7 items that Israel is blessed with. So not only is Israel blessed with these items, But it's going to tell me, Rav Chanan says, Kol ha-pasuk hazeh l'shiurim nemar. All of those items, each one is a measurement for a different halacha. And since this is a pasuk, that means that all of these measurements are daraisa. What is the measurement that wheat is used for? What are we using wheat to measure? So chita, because the items that Israel is blessed with is wheat, barley, and now the other grains are included in those two. Then you have grapes, figs, pomegranates, dates, and olives and dates. So those are the 7. So we start with wheat. Look at the Tanan, it's teaching us the following Mishnah. Someone enters into a house that has tzaras on it, that has leprosy on the house, on the bricks of the house, the stones of the house, there's blotches of leprosy. The Caleb al Ksefai, and he has his clothing over his shoulder. Caleb his clothing. The sandal of biyadav. It means he's not wearing it. He just has it on his shoulder. And he has his sandals and his rings in his hand. He's not wearing his sandals on his feet, and he doesn't have the rings on his fingers. He's just carrying. Why isn't he dressed? Because he just came out of the mikveh. He went into the wrong house, went into the tzaras house. So, hu v'heim tmeim miyad. He becomes tamei immediately. He becomes tamei, but his clothing also becomes tamei immediately. Why? Because a house of tzaras is like a house that has a corpse in it, and it makes everything inside contaminated. There is no corpse in it. It just has tzaras. It has leprosy. But anything that enters in it becomes tamei. So let's say he's wearing his clothing. He's a regular dressed person. His shoes are on his feet. His rings are on his finger. And he's wearing his clothing. So hu tamei miyad. He becomes tamei immediately, just like we said in the last case. However, his clothing have this interesting halacha. The clothing remain tar until he waits in the house the amount of time that it would take to eat half a loaf of bread. Very interesting halacha. So if he's not wearing the clothing, they become tamei right away. If he is wearing them, then there's a delay. And that delay is based on a pasuk that says, if someone eats in the house, he has to wash his clothing. It says, if he goes into the house, then he has to wash his clothing. If he eats in the house, if he goes into the house, he becomes tamei. If he eats in the house, he has to wash his clothing. The Gemara learns from this that it doesn't actually mean he eats in the house. What it means is, if he waits there, the amount of time that it takes to eat, then he has to wash his clothing. If he brings the clothing in, then the clothing aren't considered clothing. It's just considered other utensils, whatever. But if he's wearing them, then they're considered clothing. Then he has to wait in there enough time. He doesn't have to. If he waits in there enough time, then his clothing becomes tamei. What do you have to eat? Sometimes when I daven in the yeshivas, Rabbi Shachat is there. So we put on our tefillin in the classrooms, and we would go into the shul wearing our tefillin. And he comes in from his car, he's holding his tefillin. So we hold the door for each other. So he tells me that, 1 second, if you're wearing it, then it enters later. If you're holding it, it enters right away. So yeah, who are you letting in first? You're letting the tefillin in. So the tefillin which should be entering first by the person holding it, not the person wearing it. So anyway, paschitin, what type of bread are we talking about? Do you have to wait the amount of time to eat half a loaf of bread? Is it chaim? No. It's axe bread or something like that. Paschitin v'lei paser, and it has to be wheat bread, but not barley bread. It takes you longer to eat barley bread, probably because it doesn't taste as good, so you eat it slower. Mesev, well, you're leaning vaychal belifta and eating it with the dip. I guess that also makes it easier to eat. So that's the amount of time, half a loaf of bread. A whole loaf of bread would be 8 sizes of an egg, and a half a loaf is 4. That's that amount of time that it would take to eat 4 egg sizes of bread. Sa'ira, what do we learn from the barley? If there's a small bone of a corpse, it doesn't give off contamination in the tent, because to give off contamination in the tent or under a house, under a ceiling, that's only if it's the majority of a body. Or a full body, of course, but or a majority of the body. It's the spine or whatever. But just a bone, that gives off contamination just by touching, by carrying or touching. And how big is that bone? Even if it's the size of a barley. Geffen, when it comes to grape, what is the measurement of the grape? A revius of wine for the nazir. Now Rashi over here just leaves it like that. If a nazir drinks a revius, it's a quarter of a lug of wine, he took a vow, he's not going to drink wine, he's a nazir. So then he gets malchus. Tosfos says that that's not how Rashi translates it in Masechta Sukkah. He has a whole other story in Masechta Sukkah. He's not talking about drinking wine. He's talking about eating grape products, peels or whatever. Now, the interesting thing is that eating grape products should be measured by a kazayas, but it turns out it's measured by a revius, which is a liquid measure. How do you get a liquid measure when using a salad? You do water displacement. So what you do is you take water, you take liquid, and you put the salad in, and however much liquid spills out, that's how you measure the liquid. Now, because there's depending on the viscosity of the liquid, there's a surface tension, creates this meniscus over the cup. So how much water is going to spill out is depending on what type of liquid you have. Because it can hold more because of that surface tension. You look at the becher, you can see that there's a little bit, if it's makbid for it to spill over. So it didn't spill over when it still has that little rim that's above the cup. So it says that you have to use wine to measure the grapes. That's why it says geffen. You use wine to measure the grapes, it becomes a little bit more, because it can hold a little more liquid. Okay, as opposed to water. Te'ena, we turn the page and Dalit on the page. The fig, what's the measurement that we get from the fig? Eretz Yisrael is blessed with figs. K'gregers leitzeh Shabbos. And they don't want us to forget Masechta Shabbos. When it came to carrying on Shabbos, things were measured by egregors. Did you carry, as if you carry a little something on the side of your clothing or in the hem of your clothing, was that considered carrying? It had to be something that's significant. Otherwise, it wasn't really considered labor on Shabbos. But if it was the size of a fig, then that's considered carrying. Remind. What is the measurement of a pomegranate? See, what happens is, if a homeowner has a vessel that breaks, he'll still use it for something else. He doesn't throw it out right away. Until it breaks to such an extent that it can't even hold a pomegranate. If it has a little leak, so instead of using it for liquid, he'll use it to hold grain. If it has a bigger leak, instead of the grain, he'll use it to hold nuts. Whatever, it'll go on. I can't use it for this, I'll use it for that. Once it's dropping out pomegranates, then it becomes not a vessel anymore, it becomes pure. In other words, it became tamei. How does it become tar? When it becomes broken. If it breaks to that extent, then it's considered pure. It's not a vessel anymore. Eretz shemen v'dvash, I guess. We start off with Eretz shemen. Eretz shemen. That means a land of olive oil. Eretz shekol shurei kazayis. A land that all its measurements are measured by the olive, the kazayas, like an olive. Which means if someone eats the forbidden fats or blood, or noiser, which is leftover, or pigel, all the halachas is all the kazayas. The Gemara says, Kol shurei al kadaita, all the halachas are kazayas. You just gave me a list of a bunch of things that were figs and that pomegranate. You just gave me a whole bunch of other items. So it's well, majority of. We gave you specific ones that were not this, but minastam, ordinarily it's all olives, the size of an olive. Dvash, when it comes to honey, it doesn't mean bee honey. It means date honey. Honey is referring to a large date that because on Yom Kippur, it doesn't say you shall not eat. It just says you should afflict your soul. And that means that you don't eat something that's satisfactory. So if it would just say don't eat, then it would be, kazayas. But it doesn't say don't eat. So therefore we learn that the measurement is the size of a date. That you're not supposed to eat on Yom Kippur the size of a date.
Rabbi,
yeah.
It seems that every time we mention honey, this is the second time we're referring to date honey. Last time it was with it spoils. So I guess we never referred to bee honey in the Gemara unless there's enough. But this is the second time now that honey is related to dates.
Right. That's interesting. Last time when we mentioned it about the spoiling, we said that it's dates just to answer the question. We said, I thought honey doesn't spoil.
But I'm saying,
I read that on Google.
So Ken Zayn.
Right.
I read everything on Google, what I didn't learn in kindergarten.
I hear. Okay, so all of this was a very long question. The problem with learning Gemara is you have to remember what you were talking about. We said that this was a halach l'moshe misinai, that measurements are halach l'moshe misinai. We said it's halach l'moshe misinai, it's a pasuk. Now we finished the pasuk. It means we're back to the end of the question.
But it doesn't talk about Amos.
The Amos it's going to mention by the Mechitza.
Okay.
I think that's what it wants to do. Yeah. Unless there's Amos for other things. But no, Amos would be for Mechitza. So we'll see it. Now, so what's our point? Our point of bringing this whole pasuk, the point is to tell me that it's not halach l'moshe misinai. It says it in the Torah. The Gemara says, "It is brashir michtav ksivi." Do you think that it actually says these measurements in the Torah? It doesn't say these measurements in the Torah. It says a pasuk, Israel is blessed with these fruits. These are really halacha u'moshe misinai. All of these laws that we said, whether it's the law of how long you have to wait in a house of tzaras, or what size of bone, or eating on Yom Kippur, carrying on Shabbos, or vessels that are dropping things out of it, all of those are really a tradition from Moshe. The pasuk that we had, that was just a way of remembering the halachas, because people would know Tanakh, and the oral tradition was memorized by heart. So whatever you can associate with something that's memorized would be easier. It's asmachta. We use psukim to help us remember other halachas. It's asmachta. Gemara says, well, okay, you did one. There's three things there that you said that are halach l'moshe misinai. Shiurin was the first one. You said that that's really halach l'moshe misinai. The pasuk is just to help you remember. Now we're up to chatzitzin, something that that interrupts the water from getting to the body when you go to the mikveh. Where it says chatzitzin daraisa, that also says in the Torah that you can't have an interruption. Pretty clear. It says kol basari b'mayim. I'm not sure if Rachat says basari b'mayim, Rachat says kol basari. I'm not sure exactly how that works. What's the exact words there? But it says shlo yadav rachaytzis bein basari l'mayim. Nothing should interrupt. It says it in the Torah. B'mayim. What does it say?
There is a pasuk called basari. There's a pasuk called basari.
The pasuk called basari, and does it finish with b'mayim?
No, it doesn't say b'mayim. It says v'rachat b'mayim. It says v'rachat b'mayim is called basari. That's the pasuk.
Here we're clearly quoting the called Rachas B'Mayim. It's called Basari. Okay. I don't see any note that adjusts it. So, what do we learn from B'Mayim? We learn B'Mei Mikveh. That it doesn't have to be a spring. It could be water that's collected water. As long as it's not flowing, collected water. Kol Basari, what do we learn from all Basari? That means that Mayim shekol gufa yoyla behem. It has to be.
Isn't it saying chukas b'harachatz b'sor b'mayim?
Yeah, there's another pasuk b'rachatz b'sari b'mayim. There's another pasuk b'rachatz es besarei.
Torah
The question is which one he's quoting.
right.
What do you have?
Torah Shalom on the bottom right says the pasuk. Vish kisetzei Rachatz is called Besarei.
Rachatz es kol besarei. It doesn't have b'mayim.
No.
No, it says Berachatz
And that's
b'mayim
the
is kol
pasuk he's
b'sarei.
using.
Berachatz b'mayim is kol b'sarei.
Okay. So the way that we're learning this would fit well, Rabbi Lipsker, because it says Verachatz, she lo yeh davar chaitzitz ben b'sarei l'mayim. B'mayim tells me b'mei mikveh. And it's in order. Notice the drasha is in order of the pasuk, not the way our Gemara quoted the pasuk, but the way the pasuk actually says. Kol b'sarei is mayim shkol gufa eila b'hem. It has to be that you have to be able to fit your whole body into the water in one go. Now, how much water is that? So we don't measure it using a liquid measurement. It's an amma by an amma by 3 ammas. Okay, so that's the size of the water. But what we're talking about here is not the amma issue yet. What we're talking about here is the chatzitza. One of the things we mentioned is shlei davar chaitzitz. What are you telling me? It's halach l'mishum Sinai. It's not. It says in the Torah. Okay, how big is the 3 by 3 ammas? By 1 amma, a person can crouch down into that area. Shir chachamim may mikveh memsa. They said that it turns out to be 40 sa. Each sa is 144 eggs. So it times that by 40. Okay, so that's what we have a question again, that it says it in the Torah, and Reb Chanan told us that it's not Reb Chanan. Reb Chanan tells us that it's Kol HaPasuk. Rav told us that it's Halach L'Moshe Misinai, and here we have a pasuk for it. The Gemara says, Ki Yitzchel Chesel Esarei. Well, the hair, we didn't mention that there can't be a chatzitza on the hair. That didn't say in the Torah. So the Halach L'Moshe Misinai says that if you have hair that has a chatzitza on it, then it's not going to work. Could the Rabbi Baravuna, Damarav Baravuna, Nimachas Kshura Chitzatza, Shalosh Ena Chitzatza, Shtayim Eni Yedea. When a hair gets knotted, so if it's one hair that gets knotted to itself, then the knot becomes very tight. If it's 3 hairs that get wrapped around each other, then the knot is still loose. It's like taking out a knot in your shoelaces, that if your shoelaces are thick, it's easier to take it out. But if they're very thin, shoelaces, like the dress shoelaces, it gets tight, it gets pulled, it's like really tough. So a knot in the hair, in one hair, it gets very hard to take out and no water can get into there. But a knot that's within 3 hairs doesn't get as tight and water can still get inside and it's not considered a chatzitza. What about 2 hairs? Well, he doesn't know. Somewhere in the middle. It's machlekes in Nida, I think, what the halach is. But, okay. We have an answer. Halach l'Moshe Misinai is referring to the hair. The Gemara says, Sari nami deraisu. No. The hair is also deraisu. The Tanya, Barachatz kol b'sarai, es hatafel b'sarai, zeu sar, has the word es. Es is always including something. Possibly because es could also mean with, like itai, like itach. It could mean with. So, something else is being included, or it's just because it's an extra word. So it's including something. What's it including? Rachatz es b'sarei, or es kol b'sarei. It's including here. Oh, so I have an extra word in the pasuk. That's considered a deraisa, at least according to this Gemara. That's considered a deraisa. So what are you telling me that it's halach l'Moshe Misinai? I learned it from a pasuk. Gemara explains ki asay hilchasa l'ruba l'miyutai u'lamakbid l'sheina makbid. Now, Rashi's girsa here is that it doesn't say ela ki asay hilchasa. It's just ki asay hilchasa, which means that I'm not retracting from what we were holding in the Gemara until now. Where were we holding? We're referring to here. So we're continuing discussing here. And it goes like this, that the majority, the Halach L'Moshe Misinai is coming to tell me the limits of when here is going to have a chatzitza. If the majority of the here, if the minority of the here, if you care about what's attached to the hair or stuck on the hair or not, or if you don't care about it. So could Rabbi Yitzchak, kind of like Rabbi Yitzchak explains. Rabbi Yitzchak, I assume what he means, Dvar Torah, means that it doesn't say it in the Torah, it's the Halacha Moshe Sinai. The Halacha Moshe Sinai originally is that if the majority of the hair has a chatzitz on it, maybe knots, or maybe dirt, has a chatzitz on it, and you don't want those knots there, you don't want that dirt there, then that's a chatzitza. But let's say, let's say you don't care about it. If there's knots in there, or if there's dirt on that hair. Even if it's on the majority of the hair, it's not a chatzitza. I don't mind the hair has whatever it has in it. But however, they made a gzeira. If the majority of the hair is covered in something that doesn't allow the water to touch the hair, so then rabbinically there's a problem, because that's too similar to another type of majority where you don't want it there, and that's biblically an issue. Well, I shouldn't say biblically. It's halachah Moshe Sinai an issue. Ve'al miyutay hamakbid yishemru b'yamakbid. Now, we also made another gzeira, that if there's a little bit of interruption on the hair, but that little bit is really something that you don't want. You really makbid on that. You want to take it off. You didn't notice it, but you want it. If you would know about it, you would take it off. Or you couldn't get it off, or whatever. So then that's a gzeira also rabbinically, because that's too similar to something that you really don't want there, but it's the majority. Even though here it wasn't the majority, but it's too similar to that, so it's a gzeira. The Gemara asks, why don't we make a gzeira, anything, a small amount that you don't care, because it's similar to a small amount that you do care. Or inam mishum rubei sheina makbid. Or to a large amount that you don't care. Should make a gzeira. Well, the Gemara answers that. That's easy. He gufa gzeira, gzeira. What you're comparing it to itself was only rabbinic. It was only a decree. Should make a decree on a decree. We don't. It'll go on forever. We don't make decrees on decrees. There's a biblical law, and there's a decree on the biblical law. So the biblical law should be like a. You remember in genetics the Punnett square. Remember that? So you have one corner, it's four possibilities. You have one corner, that's the real issue. And then you have the two catty corner that are next to it, and then you have the fourth corner, that's fine. So
I have no idea what you're talking about. It sounds like you
just make a diagram.
It sounds like you were a science teacher at some point.
Make a diagram of 4 boxes. In one corner you put Rubaya Makbid, the majority, covering the majority of the hair that you also don't want it to be there. And you go down one level and you say, it's not the majority, it's the minority, but you still don't want it to be there. Then you go over from the top, you go over one level. And you say that it's still the majority, but you don't mind if it's there. So those two are going to be rabbinic, very good. Those two are going to be rabbinically prohibited. But the last one, the last corner, which is not the majority, and you don't even care if it's there, to make that an interruption, so that would be too far removed from the original biblical law. One question on this Gemara that I have, which I don't have clarification, I looked in the commentaries, is I know that here is considered an interruption based on the Torah. It says S. We're saying, well, the details of that S, the details of that are halach l'moshe Sinai. How much? What's going to be the interruption? So we said that it's the majority that's you don't want. You're makbid. You don't want it. What would I have understood without the halach l'moshe Sinai? What is the yes telling me without that? That's what the Gemara doesn't clarify for me. It just leaves it, and it doesn't.
As a tavel of psari simply means that your hair has to be in the mikvah. That when it says rachat psari, that your hair can't stick out. That when the Torah says you have to wash your body, that's the original halacha of esa tavel of psari, not like abi chatzitza.
Oh.
We're extending the din of chatzitza to halacha l'moshe to hair also.
So without the halacha l'moshe Sinai, if I put my hair under the water, but it would be in a shower cap, it would still be considered. I would be yaitzer. That's what it comes out. That's what I'm understanding.
I don't know about that because he's talking about if the hair is knotted. If it's in a shower cap, you never put it into the mikveh. He's saying, in other words, without the pasuk, I would think that a person go to the mikveh and the hair could stick out. It could be on top of it, it could float on the water, or if they have an afro, it could stick out. Comes the Torah and says, "Brachas kol es b'sar b'mayim."
But it needs to go under.
Under as well.
Okay, very good.
And now we're extending the laws of chatzitza to your hair as well.
Very good, very good. Yeshakayach. The Gemara now says, Daniel, we're up to your part. It says, Mechitzas deraisa. What are you telling me that mechitza, what's considered a wall, a partition, is halach l'meshim Sinai? We know it from the Torah. The Amar Mar, the master taught. It says by Moshe that Hashem will speak to him from above the kapayros. Now, the Aron, the ark that contained the luchos, the tablets, that was 9 tefachim, because it says an am and a half, 6 plus 3, it's 9 tefachim. The lid is another tefach, 10 tefachim. And above that, God would speak to Moshe. So that means that that's already considered a separate rishus. That means that what's considered a partition is 10 tefachim. That divides between rishuyas. So we know that a mechitza needs to be 10 tefachim. So what are you telling me that it's halach l'meshim Sinai? We learn it clearly from the Torah that the Aron together with the kapayros is 10 tefachim, and that would be the size of a mechitza. The Gemara says, "Leitzrichu l'Rabbi Yehuda dama amas binyan ba'ama bas shisha amas kelim ba'ama bas chamisha." We had this once before. That there is a possibility that the Aron is an am and a half, yes, but that doesn't mean that it's 9 tefachim. The Aron is an am and a half, that means it's only 7.5 tefachim, because an amma is really only 5 tefachim. Plus a half is 2.5, plus the lid is 8.5 tefachim. So you have no halacha, you have no source that a mechitza, that a different domain would be 10 tefachim. So according to that, we have halach l'meshim Sinai. Beautiful. That's our answer. The Gemara says, what about Rabbi Meir that says that all amas were 6 tefachim? Then I have a biblical source. What are you telling me? It's halach l'meshim Sinai. It says, Ma'ikal Meimar, Rabbi Meir, Ma'ikal Meimar. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Meir, ki asay hilchasa. What do I need? Halach l'meshim Sinai that tells me measurements of mechitzas. It's coming to tell me good. Good means a fictitious wall that starts on the bottom. I imagine that it goes up. Halachically, it continues up, even though it's not there. Like some people build a sukkah that doesn't go up to the schach. You have the same thing going down, if there's just a wall on top. It's machlekes about that. Lavud is any area within 3 tefachim is considered attached. If you have to put poles down, it's considered like they're combined. And l'daifin akuma, and a bent wall, which we learned about yesterday, where you can put schach, even though it's not directly on the walls, but it goes over, it bends over, it's considered a bent wall. Yeshakayach, everyone. My father is here on the learning with us. Yeshakayach.